everyone. Walter, how are you feeling? That's a good start. Hi everyone joining us online. This is our camera? Yeah. Hi everyone joining us online. You're very welcome, and we're really glad to be able to facilitate the online screening. For whatever reason you need to be at home, whether it's the weather or anything else, hello to all of you. So this evening I'm about to introduce our 7 p.m. slot. After that we'll have half an hour break before our 9:30 slot, and later tonight we actually have a special party happening in the Long Valley. So we have lots of pizzas to fill you up, and we have the bar to ourselves. So if you want to stick around for that, then everyone tends to dish the dirt really and spill the tea at that, so it's worth sticking around for. We can all talk about who's your favourite reading and everything. No, we won't. None of that. So I'm going to introduce for you our Dús Barra, Séamus ó Súilleabháin. I asked him about the introduction, and he asked me to tell you to all have great pity on him. So I don't know if you could channel your pityful responses from the get-go. We think that'd be a good start. So as well as that, Séamus Barra ó Súilleabháin is a poet from Listowel, County Kerry. Bhuaigh sé slamfiliacht de le Héireann Gábhíle sa Héindeag leis an Dáin Sin Cultúr. His first book of poems, Baha Gonal Guibh, was published in 2016 by Clo Éireann Connacht. He releases music under the name of Súilleabháin, but I believe tonight he will be sharing some poetry. So welcome Séamus, all to you.
Sáin sibh chuir de gael. My phone is Hey. Yes. Okay. And wist je dat een pictuur had in orde? En verlicht, ja, een piece of verlicht en zo. So Dina not even saw raise. Hier sef nish an skáilán, samplad an trádaíochse. Dianta ag an scríomhaí fiochra mac íomhar. As céad na féile le stúthal íochtar chiarí reachtaíoch na chúir. Le fáinní gealan le ní bheith héna gaidaí as mo chneiste, im screiste gan bhuaomh, im hí cháid díanach ihe bu réir capan na córsan béal didish gur mo cháidí me. Timppel an mette de chuirim an bhéir ada a knappe, sún snús cuaig nómatar fé cuaig goid a chlig, inis tuaisgurt inis stelle bheithig. Rapper an noras dó síos go tún puil mo chohaso ba chuma pléscán im mo callú a díri a suchta, mo bhert ó nísio tír a stócha, dar é fed a fós fagan rodí agus bólin bóthir. An bhaidamh na híche wan nuid a bhí an bio. Stella war twa as Paula Louis mo cahíe go ma ó. Seanna chaintóíar fud de tí a dian na gló. Tám se mo cholas ní has dían bhuam bheith wóch. An sunnig fuir an le aidíam le garó díirle. Ganna go ma chaha vactrai rob fud is líne. Do menting Mary dá la brethe. A tis go raibh na chénrug de le slach. Be gorum ceanile je a chenach. Stíl sé a spéisiúla se é seo, I casa chuin cíní daoine uisle. Le blalafa an teveris on yedi here like links. Fuck Peterson ni yenad mo labi godorish kazama bauzi. Ho bougie le tidi, tospacha dia le tadig lasa so shilig, Sero karma, tishka leida tire shul. A irid shana vahe fas me kishnu hula hurga counter rayer few will have nu. Vahe live a bit egg sul. Nakasa one gideon le chila. Nakasa one fair sheen show a fast. Nakasa snasig tachten a mogi. Am wille goten losan. Nakasa one gideon le chila. Nakasa one fair sheen show a fast. Nakasa snasig tachten a mogi. Am wille goten losan. So shin viva liber noch. Viva liber noch. So. an rud a chilíon librnach, sais, smar seo chur duine chume, Baltabáin, hí sé státe agus hí sa cahabíal hí begla sé rúna chuéis nadasa. Ach dúirt sé, I cheamis nadar an bhfuil chloch sin a hart a mu sé ró bheogart, go mu sé ró bhúrart. So he said, what you're wearing, I don't know, is it too small for you or is it too big? And that, a rina uisle, is the definition of librnach. Okay? So that's one of the poems that Fiachra has written out. Cad a dear my fashion. Neither my fact fa. Okay. Ceanile, ach níl an ceann sa scíte ar an lá scríbhin. Agus beidir go bé an fáil nach bhfuil sé scíte ná ní sé scríte fós, ní sé críochtnathe fós a sé fós ach a tharúgam. An dá áirithe seo. An murder machine an Ted le háir an gceansa. No, do you know what, actually, fun of me ceanna bhain eile, do you know what I mean? Murder machine and son. I'm going to warm up. I'm going to try to get my lungs cleared out a little bit. We'll go for a song instead. Okay? So, seo ceanna dhéana sé ag go bhéal cúpla bliana hin. So this tune is called Rahanach. Is me strakiachent hervoskan telefisham Muchaun na gomma hogent das na kreaturi kwyfacham Mohon a gutsch glib go lubber noch im hula Lubber noch? An remote control ver is the jaws go gassen as glóna slutem A rahanoch a van biog a van biog A rahanoch a van biog ni all me a rishti A rahanoch a van biog vanity van biog Rahanoch a van biog is come along with joulerem Go will it a knaf shale gor blarna Catalone Hedian of Rira, Rula, Bula, where no cost. Son can further a tough wave his class feel fetish the leshe glory. Nach fast sucht over Fargach la, a horka so of noch can void of ra, noch a van biog, a van biog. A rahanoch a van biog, ni all the so marishti. Rahanoch a van biog, vanity van biog. Rahanoch a van biog, is come along with him. Trasna saulo mare santa top has a roskalt. His slow we go around and towards the rise on Pakistan the dealer machna Mishlan Rira ringach rizla Volle sich dach masel klecher packaged head tos die domsti dero Ni reven poker ma kupla ping en ruwa Klisker nigger was me lave lorug noch en truwa Kan derko war regine Na pwyn cardis y store, yet I want in the loss of a gum, na cart the wink of her the Rahanoch a van biog, a van biog, a Rahanoch a van biog, ni all it's so arishti, Rahanoch a van biog, vanity van biog, Rahanoch a van biog, is come along with let him. Machli a valles mochi prati a rebo. Kechas fior mer an tradach scat to wear in dina vi ban na co we glam is ban la we queen we marsha face na merigi gale of cartesi or sham Bovoir an taharu hit don stain An rira ruela buela nishetir ma macher na kosan Gan ein TV a siw, gachyn y dwys dy hyr la yn lwyn. Las y stwydyn fiog y fan is scapus y sgat y ffwylan. Rahanoch a van biog, a van biog. A rahanoch a van biog, ni all it's so arishti. Rahanoch a van biog, vanity van biog. A rahanoch a van biog, is come along with jouler. So, I'm digging you got to speel a rahanoch. Digging to Rahanoch. It's a foreign. It's a foreign. Kent Horan the Hume Shin reached. For this and phone son what agent. And I had a good phone, Villa Shin. And I had an ship and phone. Do you recognize the melody? Do you recognize? Huh? Ecamos, or that. Yeah, so it was Ecamos ganja smuggling. So it's a version of that. But Rahano Chabandiog it's a chorus of a traditional song. Rahano Chabandiog Banbandiog Rahano Chabandiog Krishtompiag Zimer Rahano Chabandiog Banbandiog Rahano Chabandiog Krishtompiag Zimer or like Marshin. And it's actually a woman's name, Rahanoch, but it means a foreign. It's a beautiful name actually, Rahanoch. And seemingly it was I think a song came from Ivrahach in South Kerry as well. Ronan McAvee, the great broadcaster, I guess, Boone Charan and Noel, I guess, Boone Charan and he was a big influence on a lot of Irish speakers, like just listening to his show on the radio. And a lot of the kind of, I suppose, slang terms for like contemporary stuff that's been translated to Irish. I feel like that school of thought, like that came out of Ronan and Cabaret Crackalta, that they kind of scapche on a chittas than termicht, and that's definitely where I would have heard Rahanoch as a term, like for the first time. So yeah, it means weed, it means knipe. So yeah, it's a flip on that. So I love flipping stuff from tradition and kind of like using it in another form. Shein no Rodí. Alright, so this one on council, this is called La Bida. I guess La Bida means a lovely day, or La Bra. So La Bra. And a La Bida or La Bra is it's a slang term for a visitor to the Gaeltacht in the summer. And I think the idea was all they could say, like every time they'd be passing the locals, was a La Bida, like La Bida. So, La Bida, fine day, and then the name stuck in, like. It's amazing how things like that stick. And so the idea of the song is kind of, and then it might be to do with the weather as well, like, because I feel like in areas where there's a lot of kind of visitors, it's seasonal. It's like the fawn log, the bird, the way it kind of migrates. So like people come and they fill up an area, especially with tourism and stuff like that in a big way. But then in the off season, it all kind of scatters. I guess in some time, of course, do lager on Yierig. So I was very interested in that idea of the La Bra. So I kind of imagined it maybe in the context of like, maybe even like a relationship almost, like someone that comes, but then they're kind of gone again, there's kind of like an idea like that. So, so I'll give you a few verses of it. So it goes, Marshall. Ardíonn tú ména siar the knock breanin. Ma chosab win na jelly agus tagan nurim seher. Ma chosab win na jelly is ma shoe let the have. O lig them vete gut in ma la bra chalin ban. Ardíonn tú ména siar the knock breanin. Ma chosab win na jelly agus tagan nurim seher. Ma chosab win na jelly is ma shoe let the have. O lig them vete gut in ma la bra. Is gjaule heru an na fadiga do gedachte bewebe. Ni hege willen tú voer ach te chom brain te. Láidir an na tein gan in chóram na hiúcra, ro bhile sin hana féin. Tá má bhaile míl seacht sam reis, ní éim na chéine eile an bhart, ach mil na mecha bí mar tí ná dúrtha, I de chud meile ba bhín na mo bheith clúdatha, mi sé Jimmy de bhíle stór, ag file fé jóig. Is mó at a huar fa mé I tros na le, díle bhain chun dín seanna chuiseach, is ní bhil an riomh dul stré. Sé de feste dúchas féinnig é in net an le, is ní lein tóra le sin fadas go bán vada tú na bhe. Braham se wim I speisialta win sa dú hic seo, like Bitcoin mar stór focail le gaidí ní slóch fyrra. Latsan ní caha ma hen a roint ní sa bó, is de chostat mo chud radarach dear fawr a dhégan ar nos. and tú sais libernach go chalín. Agus the born and libernach and son. The libernach has just overcome my ability to finish that verse. Shin libernach there, that's a great example of libernach there. Lanan tú mar lana chanscartán an laún. Lanan tú mar lana chanscartán ín edible ún. Lanan tú mar lana chan fan log an daún. Lanan tú mar lana chanscartán ín edible ún. Nim chrá even siban lumved de chrá. The text and lalán the raw mesh. Agus pictúrí le captions gan darda fies fé like Barra sexy beidir go scrisa san is díami. Ná lig fá gom a bheithe gut dem lá brar fag starvúr chrí a chalín bán. Mar níl pógus dis na de bhíalbán. Is tá hiile iad fór me tráige níana. I tochad is clochad a bhím seo agus fioch mar a rihim le dúl si is de chaumi nó. Níl pógus dis na de bhíalbán. Is tá hiile iad fór me tráige níana. I tochad is clochad a bhím seo agus fioch mar a rihim le dúl si is de chaumi nó. An bóthar ó thuaig is an congar a dúig. An bóthar ó thuaig is an congar a dúig. Na do mu jou le an lá marach ach an noch tam a chrí tuais go doch I breistin mór timppel. An bóthar ó thuaig is an congar a dúig. An bóthar ó thuaig is an congar a dúig. An bóthar ó thuaig is an congar a dúig. Na do mu jou le an lá marach ach an noch tam a chrí tuais go doch I breistin mór timppel ar dínach. So voor de zeer there, voor de zeer. No, niet gone. Like, well, you're very participatory actually. Fair play to you, like, right? If you're so keen, I'll put you to a bit of work, will I? Right. So, couple bliaar hin. Shahe. Stochel, wie is een zo stochel? Kerbouten, ik go veel. So, host, jenes Norwegian oveler schul sig lang fadder in the Long Valley pub. Do you still have nights there? Yeah, I'd done that that was one of my first readings ever, I'd say, like outside of Galway and Kerry. So yeah, a bit of history in OVL, and I suppose a lot of the people that are writing Oscail now, like a lot of our work does come back from that generation, from the two maybe generations of Cork writers and stuff. So yeah, I go huntuch about Harnash Gorky or me like. But Yenis an dawn so couple blian no hen I go OVL. Now we double bass on an ocean, but you lane double bass of them. So how are we going to work this one out? All right, this is cheesy like, but sure, look, we're all friends here, right? So we'll say half of you can do the bass and the other half of you can do the chant. Right? Are you into kind of like a bit of hippie stuff here, a bit of woo? Okay, let's go, right? Okay. All right, so I'll leave under the technology on a second. So this, whoever wants to do it, this is the melody. Dun da 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 dum da do do dum da da dum da dum da da dum da da do 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 da da dum do do dum do do da 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 da. Okay, come on. Now, on tape saw, you keep going. On tape saw, right? Skris. Skris yesh. Skris chlé. Skris anord. Skris ord. Skris stais. Skris chetin. Sgris chrommel. Sgris ar. Sgris latriocht. Sgris an dansa. Sgris romsa. Sgris rivsha. Sgris an tigsha. Sgris an talovsa. Sgris an fonsa. Sgris an mikesa. Nish Abri, what do you want to sgris? What do you want to sgris? Want beke mache, gelossen te. Kada? Sgris farin. Yeah, actually. Sgris farin. Sgris brochel. Sgris an fucht. Sgris an tas. Sgris an Free State. Sgris an Tueskort. Sgris an Lár. Sgris an the Himmel. Sgris an Sgris. Sgris an Asgris. Sgris an Nabsgris. Sgris an Niol. Sgris Ia. Sgris an Grediv. Sgris an Anstediv. Sgris an Smuinov. Sgris an Sgris Sgris. Sgris. Fear. Tagachrud Sgrista. No, definitely Sgris an Fonsa. Mashiv Harde. Murder machine. Emma were brak tasha haram dole mon action. Foggy got me laughing in the here the grain a killer. Eistig me gar Mr. Kathleen March and Free State now the public does so chop DR law. Tommy de Cahavan no madame so gelashta. Deal of weather connaison boiler sa tigalassa. 32 words for a gort. Yereni costune is gone gort again again that took a hungorta. Tourimi feshagus, tourimi feshud. Badagun falum connaison rani at woorde horsetu. Kui keen deal the ron dirokid of the rahul keen nuskal and korwal like skogun keen. I shan't stay alone or yenis a heart's degree. Cause dan men iltemar morine chudden ardrine gri a right of tour. Stop the gabberatchi the vondoon. Nis loop sichte, nis mo brak, shinne ta woen. Ki rebe a dus glowig na dene, ma shed the hulle nu ma de be fenig, mo kruachas hen, kruachas kachene, ni ma hanga madev tashi bio for Reagan. Tom chodadig le fadig le lauer mout say tong. Ta kyrulach der me inten misha ke a ra o wesa hene do wachi is soskadina kahert. Tom a vuna so rit, madamunach an mo kanilach de dahez. Lesson tanga yakka is the bully lahes. Mona diggin to one chest, not be borta, just a bernather. Cause I'm a gachnain, a hilrian o van Egensen Egypt. Dinig na simena, she ma wamana banaba, ach nana, tashi Palestinach. So on Dawn's Son, Murder Machine, it's kind of touching off what Theo was talking about last night. You know, it's a song about education. It's about learning, and it's about, I suppose, I wrote it a couple of years ago, Mishagus Machara Rob Umel Kiran from Guidor, and we were like talking about these themes for ages. And I suppose with the kind of art form, with hip hop, you know, with oral poetry in general, because this is something that's true in Irish tradition as well, there's a symbolic power behind violence, violent imagery in oral poetry. It goes way back, especially in Cork, poets that would be mocking each other. They try to use kind of like, you know, there was a poet in West Cork, and he was like, the fear of the poetry was he was working on the bog for something. There's not necessarily violence in this verse, but it's the only one I can think of, the Var Meehan. He was working for this poet, or he was working for a man on the bog, and he wanted a bit of sneesh. Not the sneesh now that people are taking today. Snuff. Sneesh, kind of tobacco. Do you ever take it? It's weird. But I suppose when you're very drunk, it kind of brightens you up, like, I suppose. But yeah. Anyway, sneesh was a big thing back in the day, like, and he expected to get a bit of sneesh off of the fella he was working for on the bog. His name was Donald, and he threatened him. He warned him. He didn't threaten him at all. He warned him with this 4 lines. A Ronald bechorgemach sneeshegot, hortse de skolhoch le liefte. Maar nie molem man fout said me fieke gom na gononhoort se woordes na dine wordt. A Ronald bechorgemach sneeshegot. Donald, you should have a bit of sneesh. I'm working for you. You know, he's hungry. A Ronald bechorgemach sneeshegot. Hortse de skolhoch le liefte. From my sort that could redden you with verses. Hortse de skolhoch le liefte. Is na molem man fout said me fieke gom. This sod of turf that's on my pike isn't more important to me, isn't more to me than, this fold mona isn't more to me than, is ni molem an fod said me fika gum, na gnohort sa vordes na dine vort. Chon is a fast trofa is in. Call na fili. Is na molem an fod said me fika gum, na gnohort sa vordes na dine vort. And this side of turf on my pike doesn't mean more to me than giving my people a laugh in autumn. Basically, I can write a song about you and everyone will be singing that song for all of winter, like. That's what he's saying. He's threatened, he's like saying that's nothing to me, like. That fold mona isn't more than me being able to make a song mocking you for the rest of the winter. So it's like that fear of song, of being satirized, or whatever, like. But sorry, when I wrote that song a couple of years ago, Murder Machine, I wanted to use hilaire, bullets, buamui, goni. That was all of the imagery that I was using in that particular poem. But I suppose I was obviously just with everything that's going on in Palestine in the last year. Well, it's been constantly going on, but it's been just kind of brought to people's awareness recently. And I was listening to this great journalist and scholar and poet, rapper called Low Key, and he was talking about how maybe like some of that language, you know, it kind of normalizes it. So I rewrote that poem there, Murder Machine, and I took out like the Pilaire and the Gunny, and I put in references to just Irish poetry instead. So something I did, just Le Murder Machine and so on. But it's a poem about the murder machine. One more? All right. Oh yeah, I shook you on leave. Bevinnig me goalt an trádseo, Siúla vallis Meehan da Barra, Belan na móna bu sile ón simmené bar na glúas fuór hain punca cuaig ar an náhéh. Cholú a bhína stíg sé a léirhheas a jóhainse, cé méad a thug sér féchan tú níos óige. A bhela brain te ba bhatams dar bhálta, Cuman a ben leis an lá an magún is go báiste. Cog a rón radio a trácht ar thobistí a géin, is scapa scéalta ar a hinactan ar chlí an slé, a fiú deir an dawn í bhachán a gráfa le bué le cimad atar an hain. Sa tarman sa da haunta bhí slán sa bhálta, ben eile sa thail ní thógach dáte. Sunins na Diego ba vinnig me dianamh an trosio, gan e chos bhúm bla an bhadca mar sile bhuaim. Sunins na Diego ba vinnig a dhéanas an troscialna, gan e chos bhúm bla an bhadca mar sile bhuaim. Tá meach losán ige duine roiin suas a chuma tic chuin doch, nílam seo a mag a chút ví sem scot, fléimen ag an nuchsa is a hiile ros na nivan na bhrágan in na saola númid strais, gan tachta nuas sér na trisha nu go léir. Se mé bhfuim. Now it could be like Ramor to Ali who remember the sauna temperatures of that stove in November, if I'd wear extenders with the saunest lady in the land, Balnave Kilavantan with the cup of tea in the hand. Ach dan eich an son de vennig ginsint éhig mar an nocht, tá an sail is a bháthir dubh do a chá, tá an tintán is stíg chó fuórla seach, is ní léna fadam, I gagar dodam gan a bheith a cuine bheith go chéin rud a hit amach, go chéin le fáil agus fáilí sa tail, na haman no go léir, na dúirt leat go rágus buach, as na haman no go léir dragar tú agus mé a gléich tá a gléich. Ach a dún a bhála sa, there's a ball of Kírans, bailíam le chéile iad is dían an búrla de fá péri nuach dá fé a cúpla fire leidir, tam cho chef dú le MacGyver. Is tam chun seo ba lasú a ríist, an grásag an teora an grá an chaníal sé an grá, a lasad an grá a bhrunne seo ar nó a bhaní, agus sífud an nós mar a dhéan fá fedahar hinta nó sí riachta chó soca le seace múni, cúpla smachan do ma fíp, is chum a angel cuideachta in náda se do gcuifad sa go deo. Íomh agah.
Séamus, it was a very captivating performance there, and na fumna sa na focail bhí sure ar fad go margat. And you were great as well. That bit of accompaniment was great. You didn't think you'd be performing tonight, but maybe we should all accompany you in your next reading, and be Séamus featuring the winter warmer audience could be a good one. So our next poet will be joining us online. I think, will she be joining us from San Francisco? Hi, Ma. Good to see you.
Hello. Welcome. Hi.
How are you doing?
Great. Wonderful to be here.
Great. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. And what time is it where you are now?
It is 11:36 a.m. It's the morning.
Okay. Well, good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
So
everyone.
I'll just read a little introduction for you, and then I'll let you work away. So Shein wins third full collection, Crossing the Thinking Jar. It says it's forthcoming in this season, so perhaps it's already out. You could tell us more about that. Her most recent poetry collection is Storage Unit for the Spares House by Omni Dawn in 2020, which was nominated for the Northern California Book Award. She is the inaugural poet laureate of El Cerrito, California, and she teaches poetry in the MFA program in the University of San Francisco. Céad míle fáilte, Ma.
Thank you, wonderful to be here, and I wish I could be in the hall with you all. So thank you so much to Paul for inviting me to the Winter Warmer Poetry Festival. And I just wanted to say, Séamus, your voice is beautiful. It's lovely to be here, and I thought it would be kind of fun for all of you to see some of the art and what the poems look like on the page. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see both. All right. Okay, and please let me know can you see that? Can everyone, oh. Yeah, you can see it? Yeah? Okay, great. Okay, so my name is Shein and I live in El Cerrito, California, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area, about 15 miles from San Francisco. And I lived in San Francisco for a long time as well. And I wanted to share some poems. Oh, it doesn't look like you can. Hang on one second. So sorry. Let me try that again. Okay. Having a little bit of a Zoom. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, share. Share. Can you see that? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. So I'd like to share a little bit from my new book, and it just came out. Last night, I read at 2 nights ago, I read at City Lights Books, which is a famous bookstore in San Francisco, and had my launch. And the title of my book is Percussing the Thinking Jar. And the art is by a dear friend, Mark Dutcher, and he did the cover. It's a painting, and he also did 16 drawings of with Sumi ink. And these are 2 of the 16 drawings, and they're throughout the book. So I thought if you have any questions, you can ask me later about them. And here is a poem from the book. Okay, okay, I'm going to try my slideshow again. See if that shows up. Okay. Nope. Okay, sorry about the, okay. Okay, the thinking jar. No, it's not. Oh my God. Oh, so sorry, everyone. Okay. Let me try the Zoom. Okay. Share. Okay, the thinking jar. Scorpion alert. I wear a cyan cloak. Clock in at 10 a.m. Cerulean frost on the found footage. I see sea turtles in the subtropics. Near the marigold altars where elephants rest, I light a bayberry wick. And I just want to say a little bit about this book. One of my goals was that, well, it actually happened organically. I created forms. I started writing this book at the beginning of lockdown in spring of 2020. And I kept many journals, and I realized that I was writing in these forms that were maybe perhaps intuitive. And so this is one of the forms. I call it thinking jar form. And so each stanza has an animal as well as a color, and then the pronoun I. And here's another poem. Hyphen log. Foray. Another night, or day, nomadic migrations of cedar waxwings, circling circles above resilient hawthorn. Thank you. And here is another poem. Can everyone see this okay? Yeah, okay, great. This is called Gazelle. Sleeps near a tumbleweed, veins thumping soft. Witness the neighbors in search of water, the cabin dwellers in fear of fire. What makes sounds at night? Nwack, nwack. Ringed horns, gaunt flanks. Who takes a chariot to market? Sunday or evening, morning or March. Young gazelle with bruised sides, licking water drops from a desert fountain. Thank you so much. Animals make their way into my poetry, and especially this book. This is entitled Dear H. Dear H, I'm hanging out in the waiting room. I am blinking into another eye, gold shades, sirens again, seeing the city through the window of another window. I live in a 2-second time lapse. Dear H, I stitched a quilt for you, slivers of green lint throughout. Warmth in the waiting room now, my limbs are soft with pain. Slept last night with ears open. Noted the following: pollen drift, vessel crack, pillar bark. Dear H, missing your crackling eyes, generous fountains. And this, you were standing on a dock, and next to you, a steamer trunk made of bone. Strangers began to gather. You sunk your hand and lifted a spinning plate from the trunk. Applause and more applause. Dear H, my cat visited me from the other world. She witnessed bliss bursting from the pockets of houses open once again, bright light from the storehouse, tinny bell tones. She could smell the dirt from behind the shed. Thank you. Thank you. One of the inspirations also for this book in particular, I have a very active dream life. So many of the poems, some of the poems, I guess, come from dreams. And this is one of the poems. And this is in honor of my dear friend Annabelle. We recently lost her to cancer, and I wrote a poem for her. Observation log for Annabelle. Warmed a nest in my balmy palm, placed it back in its ginkgo tree, turned aside and took rest for a while. Thank you. So one thing I love to do is write about art. I love ekphrastic poetry. I love reading it and I love writing it. And this is a poem entitled Kite Eye. And I'll talk a little bit about the artist. The artist's name is Súilleabháin, and she had an exhibit at age 100. She lived for 100 years. And it was at the BAMFA, the Berkeley Art Museum near where we live. And this is a poem after the art piece, Kite Eye. Kite Eye or I Kite, after a painting by Súilleabháin. You look up at the sky, ask questions. You see one eye, or perhaps a kite. Must make a decision. You have 1 minute. Time almost up. An ice cap melts. A spouse betrays. Buzzer goes off. Sun beams. You crack an egg. You marry an olive tree. Brightness arrives. Memorize adverbs of frequency. Look to the left, taste of lingonberry, swallow it whole. Painted frames, forget answers. You ask for a horse, camel vision, lime bush, copper artichokes, vintage teeth, kite eye. Thank you. And, I'd like to add that one of the things that really appealed to me about your reading, Séamus, was how musical it is. And, you know, I collaborate with musicians, and this poem was one of the songs I collaborated with my friend Evan Karp, and we did a whole album together, and this was one of the poems for that album. And now I'd like to share a few poems from Storage Unit for the Spirit House. And just to say a little bit, I am Burmese American. My parents emigrated from Burma, also known as Myanmar. And while I was visiting the country many times, I would see these spirit houses, you know, throughout the country. And I started researching them and decided that I wanted to write a book that involved spirit houses, where I was raised Buddhist, and one of the practices of a certain group of Buddhists is to have a little house on stilts in front of your house, and the spirits will come and reside in that house. And these spirits can sometimes be troublemakers, and so you want to appease the spirits by, you know, doing offerings of, you know, flowers and rice and so on. So here's a poem, and it's inspired by El Cerrito. Okay, Storage Unit 202. The rental faces another house. When she arrives, there are wild turkeys in the street. It begins to rain. The storage unit in El Cerrito holds pinned moths in cases, brass castanets, tin pants, a box of cork buttons. She swims laps in the thunderstorm. Thank you. And this is a pantoum, a poetic form. And I wrote this when I was recovering from surgery. Bone. The bones of a woman, the marrow groans, aches and breaks, a fissure, a furrow, scraping and breaking, bone against bone, detachment of hips, dislocation of sorrow. Aches and breaks, a fissure, a furrow, the brakes of the car, an unsettling sound, detachment of hips, dislocation of sorrow, align the axle, your fluids are down. The brakes of the car, an unsettling sound, scraping and scraping of weight-bearing hips, align the axle, your fluids are down. Dark cherry juice in drops and drips, grating and scraping of weight-bearing hips, osteoblasts and osteocytes, dark cherry juice in drops and drips, honeycomb cartilage, something's not right, osteoblasts and osteocytes, scraping and breaking, bone against bone, honeycomb cartilage, something's not right, the bones of a woman, the marrow groans. Thank you. Not a fun time, not a fun time. Thank you so much, everyone. So this is my last poem from Spirit House, and this is one of the Spirit House poems. Spirit House 5. As a child, I did not climb trees. Instead, I gathered leaves that flew to the ground. The elms were tall in the fall, the neighbor boys cruel. One left a dead kitten in a box on the doorstep. I made homes among the leaves, safety in gold, yellow, brown. Invented a family who lived in a treehouse. Green twig, the mother, cracked branch, the father, two ferns, the missing sisters. Thank you. And I thought I'd wrap up with a couple poems from Invisible Gifts, which is my first full-length collection in 2018. And my friend Mark also did the cover for this as well. And this is called The Dressing Stick. The dressing stick, a limb on the edge of the green, and a twinkling star on the head of a small bear. Polydactyl paws, matted skin, a 7-inch scar on the left hip. She peeled the scar back and underneath found a child wearing a star hat and star shoes. The hospital stood in the center of a large cornfield, and observers remarked at its beauty and precision. They came bearing frankincense and painkillers. They wore shields. They could sew. They came bearing pork and beef. They held liquid in wires. She waved the dressing stick, and the wires spelled words through the window of the blue tent. Thank you. And I thought I'd read a love poem. We all need a good love poem now and then. This is about a town in Northern California. You will be with me in a town called Julian. The sound of horns and bells, the sound of round crowns and brown birds, bluebells. You will be with me in a town called Julian, with a slice of cake, cluster of cherries, champagne on ice. The night we met, a New Year's Eve party, a talent show. Someone pretends to be a stork, another pop of a cork. Your clear eyes and warm head. I couldn't hear your eyes, but I could see your voice. Is paradise this bed? 2 cotton blankets and a comforter on my side, a light sheet on yours, bluebells on the dresser. You touch the cat's fur, orange beneath the chin. She leaps off your chest. We rest for a while. Thank you. And I would like to share my last poem, and it's from Percussing the Thinking Jar, and it's called Observation Log. We live beneath small pounding feet. Think we're alone, but maybe we're dancing. I find a pearl and leave it on your doorstep. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mo. That was great, and we heard you and saw you very clearly here. And congratulations on the recent book launch as well. If you don't have to be away imminently this morning, we hope you can stick around for a short Q&A after the next poem's read.
I'd love to.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
So next up, I'm going to announce Paula Meehan. So Paula Meehan's award-winning poetry has garnered widespread popularity and critical acclaim. Her poetry has been scored for choirs, for solo voice, and been made into songs by artists from diverse traditions. The folk, including the legendary Christy Moore, and the avant-garde has been made into wee films, has been inflicted on the youth of the country and in schools and universities, and has been 8-1 to come up on the Leaving Cert. Paula has at least one book for sale in her merch table here, to solace of Artemis being one for sure. So if you please now welcome Paula Meehan.
Now, at last, it's great to be here. And thanks, Paul, for inviting me back. I have very fond memories of the last time I was here and of times up above the pub there. What's it called? The Long Valley? The Long Shadow, I call it. From a particular generation of Cork poets, the Long Shadow. The round table. I feel like I misspent my own youth there. I've heard so much about it. But anyway, it's great to be here. And thanks for the hospitality, Hill Fort hospitality. And last night and tonight, listening to Séamus, I could listen to him all night, but the last time I listened to a Kerry man all night, it was a disaster. I only have one joke, really. I've only one joke that I remember, and it's, how do you recognise the Kerry Mafia? And it's, they make you an offer you can't understand. Anyway, and Ma, I don't know if Ma is back there in the digital zone, but it was lovely to get a blast of San Francisco morning. I misspent a portion of my life in San Francisco as well. But anyway, I'm all sobered up and straight now. And delighted to bring you a few poems from this book, hefty enough selected poems, just to get me going. So this first poem is a short one. And I was invited by Terence Hayes, an American poet, a great American poet, to contribute to a tribute anthology for Gwendolyn Brooks, who was born in 1917. And in 2017, the anthology was published, The Golden Shovel. And in fact, Terence Hayes invented probably the youngest literary form that I know of, the Golden Shovel. And it was to take a line or a verse from Gwendolyn Brooks's poems and to use each word as the end word in a poem. So I took a line from her great poem, The Mothers, which she wrote as a consolation to the women of her community in Chicago who were being preached against for having abortions back in the 30s. Dangerous times, as we know. So this is the ghost song, and the line I took from the poem was, the singers and workers that never handled the air. From a dream of summer, of absence, I woke to winter. Carol singers decked the walls of some long-lost homeland. Late-night shoppers and drowsy workers headed for the train. So the night that you died was two-faced, June light, never far from mind, though snow fell. I handled grief like molten sunshine, learned to breathe your high, lied ghost song from thinnest air. The other poem I'll just go straight to is a poem called Home, and I wrote it after a tour of the North in 1994, just before the first ceasefire, which in fact didn't hold, but was a step towards the one that did hold and led to decommissioning of weapons. And I just read it because it feels really hopeless at the moment, but I remember writing this song thinking it's absolutely hopeless here on this island, and there's never going to be peace. So home. I am the blind woman finding her way home by a map of tune. When the song that is in me is the song I hear from the world, I'll be home. It's not written down and I don't remember the words, but I know when I hear it, I'll have made it myself. I'll be home. A version I heard once in Leitrim was close, a wet Tuesday night in the Shein Barra. I'd come for the session, I stayed for the vision and lore. The landlord called time, the music dried up, the grace notes were pitched to the dark. When the jukebox blared out, I'd only 4 senses and he left me senseless. I'd no choice but to take to the road. On Grafton Street in November, I heard a mighty sound. A travelling man with a didgeridoo blew me clear to Botany Bay. The tune too far back to live in, but scribed on my bones. In a past life I may have been kangaroo, rocked in my dream time, convict ships coming o'er the foam. In the puzzle factory one winter, I was sure I was home. The talking in tongues, the riddles, the rhymes struck a chord that cut through the pharmaceutical haze. My rhythm, catatonic, I lulled myself back to the womb. My mother's heart beating, the drum of herself and her world. I was tricked by her undersong, just close enough to my own. I took then to dancing, I spun like a dervish. I swear, I heard the subtle music of the spheres. It's no place to live but out there in space on your own, hung aloft the night. The tune was in truth a mechanical drone. I was a pitiful monkey jigging on cue. I came back to earth with the land to rain on my face, to sun in my hair, and grateful too. The wise women say you must live in your skin, call it home. No matter how battered or broken, misused by the world, you can heal. This morning a letter arrived on the 9 o'clock post, the Department of Historical Reparation, and who did I blame? The nuns, your mother, the state. Tick box provided, we'll consider your case. I'm burning my soapbox, I'm taking the very next train, a citizen of nowhere, nothing to my name. I'm on my last journey, though my lines are all wonky, they spell me a map that makes sense. Where the song that is in me is the song I hear from the world, I'll set down my burden and sleep. The spot that I lie on at last, the place I'll call home. Hi, Jerry. You're very welcome, Jerry Murphy. Coming in late. Sit down and relax. Anyway, it's great. So I'm going to read, this is the last book I published. It's a bit wonky, is it? Okay. Last year, and was delighted to get it out. So I'm just going to read at random through it. And the first is a little preface to it called Sister Trauma. I love wildflowers, I love herbals and collection, you know, I love them. I just love that they choose the best place to grow. They come in and they choose the place that is most perfect for them to thrive, like ourselves if we're lucky. So Sister Trauma brings me sage and dittany, brings me blue flowers, sits by my side in the blue hours, the cursed path of my star for the misbegotten, her humours, her transits, her simples forgotten, shows me the mountain as medicine chest, says to walk this earth is to be twice blessed, once blessed in being, once blessed in naming, shields of grace against historical shaming. McCutcher, Mrs. Grieve, Culpepper, Gallen, dog-eared old herbals of dear worts and dear balms and dear banes. She takes me by the hand to the very edge, her mysteries of cliff, of river, of littoral, of hedge. Sister Trauma offers me no choice. The grave's long silence, her compensatory voice. No, it's okay, it's okay. The title of the book, The Solace of Artemis, and I'm going to read the title poem, and I got it after research was published in 2011 that from the genetics researchers in Trinity College, Penn State University and Oxford University, who sampled the bones of bears from 27 different sites around the island of Ireland. And they ran it through their magic scopes, and they discovered that the mitochondrial DNA, the DNA of the mother line, they discovered that every single polar bear is descended from one Irish brown bear mother who retreated with the ice. And this has changed the face of bear conservancy, because it was assumed that the polar bear was this pure creature. But now they're looking at the hybrids, the grizzly polar crosses and other crosses, because the future of cataclysmic change is hybridity. So I thought it's a lovely idea for the times we live in. So the solace, and of course Artemis is the great goddess of the bear, going back to Neolithic times in the Aegean, where I spend as much time as I can. The solace of Artemis. I read that every polar bear alive today has mitochondrial DNA from a common mother, an Irish brown bear who once roved out across the last ice age, and I am comforted. It has been a long, hot morning with the children of the machine, their talk of memory, of buying it cheap. But I, memory keeper by trade, scan time coded in the golden hive mind of eternity. I burn my books, I burn my whole archive, a blaze that sears, synapses flaring cell to cell, where memory sleeps in the wax hexagonals of my doomed and melting comb. I see him loping toward me across the vast ice field to where I wait in the cave mouths, dreaming my cubs about the den, my honeyed ones, smelling of snow and sweet oblivion. So that's, oh, thank you, it's okay. That's dedicated to Katrina Crowe, our great archivist, our national archivist, who put the 1901 and the 1911 census up online, so we all became any of us who had grandparents or great grandparents. Became technicians of the census. It was all there to literally remember. I could literally remember the streets in Dublin of my grandparents and my great-grandparents. So this poem is a villanelle, one of the great singing forms that the troubadours brought into English, and it's an elegy for my father, and I love to tell this story, so those of you who've heard it before, I'm sorry, I can't but tell it again. So my father, my mother died young, so my father really became like mother and father, especially to the younger kids. And he had two great passions in life, crossword puzzles and bets. He was a gambler. And he kind of was very nervous, I think, about poetry. The way he'd put it would be that the eldest girl has taken to the poetry, the way people take to the drink. And he kind of believed it was something that probably you should do with basket weaving and secure confinement somewhere for the good of your mind. But we became great pals eventually. And in the last couple of years of his life, I was a clue and a crossword and a bet in Paddy Powers to come up on the Leaving Cert. So, you know, he looked at me with something approaching understanding. Oh, it was a great moment, I can tell you. He used to say to any family gatherings, he'd say, "Don't tell her anything, don't tell her that. It'll turn up in a poem, we'll all be," yeah, dirty linen in public and all that. Anyway, so this is diamond faceted his breath. And one of his little riddles was, which is heavier, ton of coal or a ton of feathers? My father's death lay on me like a feather. His own hard fought for last mortal breath was diamond in the radiant Samhain weather. Light as the pages that fell from the mirror, toxic dump, bank billions lost, test tube birth. My father's breath could scarce disturb a feather. The going was hard at Dundalk, at Uttoxeter. Red era a horse he believed had some worth, given the right ground, the right kind of weather. The half-done crossword, 10 across, 8 letters, daughter. 9 down, bold, no, wild. 7 down, hearths. The words themselves as light as any feather I could carry every step of my future on the smooth or rocky contours of my path, whatever the news, whatever the breaking weather. In the hospice garden, a child's laughter, falling like dry leaves to the hard black earth, was my father's death, the weight of a feather, as I roved out into the coming winter weather. That was Larry. I also, Paul, will need the time-honoured signal for when to shut up, okay? No, okay. So at the centre of this book is a sequence of poems that I was commissioned to write for the opening of the Dublin Tenement Museum, number 14 Henrietta Street, which was built for Lord and Lady Molesworth, but by the time of the aforementioned 1911 census, there were 100 souls living in the house. So I was involved from the research period, and I was asked, I know, to write these poems because I grew up in the Georgian tenements of Dublin, and I had a very funny moment in the Mansion House because it was a city council commission, and one of the councillors come over and says, "There you are, Paul, I heard you got this commission, isn't it great? You'll be writing about the tenements. What are you writing about?" And I said, "I'm writing a sequence of sonnets for the muses." And I couldn't resist, you know, because he wanted, you know, the hardcore Dublin tenement life. I just couldn't resist playing with him. But in fact, it is about hardcore tenement life. But I chose the muses as daughters because they are the daughters of memory, and they each kind of protect or are emblematic of a particular kind of memory, like terpsichore for the dance. So Cleo for history, but the one I'll read for you now is my favourite muse. She's called Polyhymnia, and her protective space is she is the muse of sacred poetry. So it remembers a moment in my childhood where we lived in a tenement that had an open door, because the tenements were either closed doors or open doors, and ours was open door. So what my mother called the poor misfortunates would come in to sleep there at night, and my mother would send me out with tea or cut a toast in the morning. So it brings that back to me. So this is Our Lady of the Apocalypse. Our Lady of the Apocalypse, who never closed her heart to the dissolute, pray for us, who gave shelter in broken down Georgian tenements, who kept the doors open to the demented ones, those who came in rags and miasmas of foul odour, in delirium tremens, the worn-out old spunkers, the displaced relics of imperial trauma. O sweet daughter of memory, veiled in enigma, who brought longed-for oblivion to the Mets drinkers, the dipsos, the alcos, the put-down-no-hopers, those who came in from chaos, from cold, from winds, from rains, to sleep it all off in hallways and stairwells, who rent the long night with sobs, who cried out to you in the throes of their last agony, grant them eternal succor. Okay, so, no, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So this is at the sign of the White Horse, and the whole last part of the book is there. I can't remember exactly how many poems are in it. I think there's 22, and they were all drawn out of a way of organizing it, because there are different forms and shapes and sizes. Some are just organic open forms, and others are some sonnets and other traditional received forms. But I used, for each poem, I used a tarot card as a way of just focusing my mind. And this was a lovely card with a white horse on it. So it's at the sign of the White Horse. But I should just say, do any of you know the great English folk song, Willie o' the Winsbury, Willie o' the Winsbury? Yeah, I think it's been revived. I think Ye Vagabonds did it there a while back. Anyway, it's a fantastic song, I've always loved. Like many of the ballads that Child collected. Anyway, I'll kind of draw on that a bit. So, at the sign of the White Horse, we called it a day, we called it a night. There was absinthe, there was Cipro, there was amnesia, there was oblivion. The waves far out were wild and white-capped, but those close in lapped and lipped at the shore, like whispers, like kisses. A red sail schooner made in for safe haven. The barman's arms were tattooed with skulls, and crosses like kisses round his neck were a rosary or a garrote. I remember thinking, if thinking it was. I was 3 sheets to the wind and listing to starboard, so I offered this witness with caveat and warning. The children played on the sand, their squabbles microcosmic to the storm that was brewing. Chair-toppling squalls blew my lines off my sheets off the line. So much to remember, so much to forget. The sun was setting, a new moon rising. It was sextile Neptune, if it matters to you. It matters to me, my first day sober. I died in your arms at the sign of the White Horse, my old self tucked in a bed of soft clay, in that port of white towers, white houses, white streets. The leaves that dropped on my grave were blessings. The white rose you laid there, a token of hope. The winter would shrive me, would scour me, would save me. When I rose from the dead, I was dressed in white linen, my angel of mercy, my angel of kindness, wreathed in myrtle, smelling of pine. On your milk-white steed with your milk-white promises, I was lady of as much land as I could ride in a long summer's day. So, Little Moons. And okay. So this one is called, pretty much along the same lines, it's called Little Moons, Little Moons. Little Moons was what she called the white pills that took her far away from us in those days, thrown down on a blue tablecloth. Little moons. And as the nights waxed and waned, they worked or they didn't. She would or she wouldn't stick around. She would or she wouldn't take a blade to the delicate skin of her beautiful arms that I remember weaving over her head as she danced at 16 in a dress of green velvet. And sometimes she was wired directly to the moon. I'd walk beside her, holding her hand, as if she might take off at any moment. You are all that tethers me to the earth, she said a week before she left for good. Nights, sometimes, I walk and wonder where she went, where she is, or where she went. Nights I cannot sleep, the moon snagged in the pines, the estuary water still, and mist seeping in from the sea, till I am veiled and grey, like a revenant myself. She loved the beach, the coves, the cliff path, the whole scape, land and water, every fox, owl, bat, every nook and cranny, and the day creatures too, the moons by day. But most she loved her little moons, flung down a dare on a blue tablecloth. She opened the night like a door to me, its earth shine and starlight, its furnace of desire. Her head bent in devotion, the slick of her body as she danced was a seal in the harbour after. And that last day we sat watching a mother crow teach her two fledglings to soften hard crusts of bread, to drop them into the dog's water bowl, to bob them with their beaks till they were soaked right through. I remember her laughter. I remember thinking these simplicities might save her if the world could slow enough for her attention to fashion some chord of attachment, if she could open to the diverse tongues of the creatures she loved, their songs, my song, but she had no attachment except to the moons that bound her, little moons laid down on a blue tablecloth. And to finish, thank you. Just to finish now, and this is a poem I wrote for a great friend of ours, of myself and Theo's, and of many people down in Allies, John O'Leary, a terrific poet, and a marvellous man for the stories, the layers of stories in Allies, the copper mining stories, but way back to the Bronze Age copper mining, he had stories from the Bronze Age. And he drowned just one August day, a nice August day. He took out his new boat to give it its maiden run, and it came to grief. His son survived, his son Chris survived, but he went down. I think he made it to a rock, but his body gave out. It's called The Grief of Creatures. And he was, I should say, he was a horse breeder. He was a great horseman. The old horse comes down, as usual, to the fence to be fed by the man who leaves the house in the breaking light of dawn with a sack of early apples. The mare comes after, and her foal, like a shy girl at her flank, coming down the mountainy field through the summer mist. The rain-drenched stallion in the lower field pricks up his ears, his companion donkey patient at the gate. And oh, they'll be waiting for the man as he whistles the two dogs to heel and turns to the wide open sea where his name is writ on water. They'll be waiting the long hours for the man to finish the line and set down his poem and pick up the bucket of sweet early apples and climb up the hill to the gate. They'll be waiting and wondering, has he fallen asleep in his bed of nettles, or is he lost in a mine shaft's coppery dark? They've not seen him take the boat out the harbour mouth. They've not seen him step the mast, but they've smelled a wind off the Atlantic, the last wind to fill his sails. The old horse comes as usual to the fence to be fed, and the mare and her shy foal, they are waiting for John O'Leary. He could nearly stretch his hand across the void to touch the grieving horses, to stroke their velvet muzzles, his hands smelling of apples, of salt. So thank you for your attention tonight.
Margaret, Paula, beautiful, very, very charming performance as well. Thank you so much. I might actually invite you back up right away for some questions if you like, if you want to join us. Pardon? One question each? Oh yeah, I was going to do two questions for all. Maybe. Okay. You heard Paul Casey, he said I'm the boss now, so that's recorded now, is it? Okay, so there are such diverse poets there, and we're joining, where Ma is back with us as well. Hi Ma. So I wanted to ask you kind of maybe an annoyingly broad question actually. Hopefully it's one of those simple questions that leads to a complex answer, you know, I'd love that. But Séamus, Ma and Paula, whoever or however of you want to answer this, I suppose if you reflect on your most recent work or maybe all of your work, do you think there's a reoccurring question that your work tries to ask, or do you think while you're writing that there's reoccurring questions in you that you try to answer with your work? And if you'd like to answer, I'll ask you to come back to the microphone. Thanks. Or Ma, you're welcome to jump in either.
Sure. That's a great question. And I recently taught a class, and I talked about how poetry for me is not so much about providing answers, but asking questions, and not necessarily having the same questions always. But when I think about my poetry, I guess, I don't know if I have like specific questions for every book, but sometimes I feel like I come from a place of just wonder. So, I had written a poem in my first book, which arose from the question, why does a glowworm glow? And I was thinking about glowworms, and then I just wanted to know, why does a glowworm glow? And a poem arose from that. And then my curiosity about spirit houses in Southeast Asia. So I started researching that, which led to a number of poems in that collection. And then I feel like with the most recent book that just came out, the questions that I was, I guess, dealing with was, this, I would say in a way, this is my pandemic collection. I started writing it at the beginning of lockdown. And so like all of us, we were, in our homes, and I think the questions that arose from that book was, how do I make connections between the language that might just flow out of, like journal writing, for example. So in the process of writing this book, I wrote filled journals with just language that was, I don't know, I felt like it was almost just coming straight from, like I was channeling it somehow. I know that sounds a little strange, but then when I went back to my journals and started looking at them, I was just so curious and wondering about all the connections of the repeating patterns that I had in a lot of the poems. So that's my answer for that question. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Bob. Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, if you'd like to answer that question, yeah, thanks.
I know what the question. I know the. Yeah, no, I couldn't possibly answer that question, but I know the kind of parameters of the question, and it is interesting that I keep going back, and it's like having another go at putting something together, and that feeling has been there from the very start, and I'm going to put something together now. And it's to do with trying to recapture a mesmeric experience of childhood, I think, of maybe even pre-childhood, maybe even to that kind of the stirring, the quickening of life within my mother, that sense of all the pulses, because it's like being in the middle of a huge drum, because you know everything is, you're being pulsed by your mother's body, and the sounds of her cycles within her bodily cycles are there. So I think that I'm trying to get, not back to the womb, but back into ritualized sound, and patterning has always been really important to me. And I'm trying to get back to how mesmerized I was as a child by poetry, or by prayer, or by chant, or by street games, by anything that ritualized in patterns, sound. So I think I'm trying to always get there. And each book or each kind of swatch of poems is maybe a retake on what is a very foundational impulse to pattern. I'd say that's it.
In theme there, Paul and Son, I suppose that actually really resonated with me, what you said there. But I suppose maybe an angle that I kind of take with it is like, I feel like when I'm composing poetry, that I kind of go back to the same headspace that I was maybe like in primary school, where you're kind of, I suppose I moved around a lot when I was younger, so I lived in England, lived in different parts of Kerry, so my relationship with language was very like, you're constantly kind of, I was always interested in language, and you're kind of, like, for instance, even just living in London, which is like a very particular kind of melting pot of languages, and then you go back, you're listening to a particular type of English when you're in the primary school, but then when you go home and you're back in the flat in next to Camden Town, and you're listening to like rural Irish accents and people from all over Ireland. So I feel like that for me, like my relationship with language is very much like from that kind of, from like a child, like that's like moving into hearing different forms of language and how like different groups like communicate with each other. So kind of interweaving between different forms of storytelling and the musicality of language as a result. So I feel like every time I'm writing a poem, I'm almost trying to figure out how are these people that are around me communicating, and how can I imitate that, and how can I tell a story through that. So that's kind of a part of my interest in language, was that.
think we have time for one more question. I decided because I'm the boss. No, Paul said we did. So kind of I suppose a lot of these questions can be about your introspective work and the work you're doing when you're not here, but I actually want to ask you, all of you, as a poet, what's your relationship with live performances or the live audience? How important is that to your work, or what effect does it have? Whoever's first to the mic now.
Should I go, or do you want me to go?
Please do, Mom, thanks.
Okay. So the question is about performing. I love doing poetry readings, and especially in person, but Zoom is great too. And one of the things that's part of my practice is that I'm a collaborator. I collaborate with musicians and visual artists and dancers. So I feel, in fact, at my launch at City Lights, just a couple days ago, I was someone in the audience asked me about this, a question similar to this, and I talked about interpretive dance. And for my last poem, I asked if anyone in the audience wanted to come up and do interpretive dance, and one of my friends came up, and it was really fun. So I feel that reading poetry, performing poetry, for me is I love poetry on the page. I love reading books, but I also feel like the experience of poetry in person is just a richer, deeper experience. It can be, and so that's my answer. I love the performance aspect of poetry. Thanks for the great question.
Thank you so much. That's a great answer. Will we go around in a circle again? I'll invite you back.
Who's up there? Probably can't see me. Yeah, and thanks, Michelle, for keeping us in such good order tonight. Appreciate it. Yeah, herding mice at the crossroads comes to mind. But yeah, I think I go in and out of phases of really wanting to be out there and taking over the world, invading Poland and such like out there in performance, right out there. But the retreat, really, my retreat is back into the intense quiet of a space where it's just me and language itself and words. And Pasternak said that every word carries its ghost. And I think for me, the actual moment of composition where I'm actually lining the words, I'm putting them in the lines, and I find if I can get their etymologies, their roots, their histories, if I can get their ghosts harmonizing on the line, then I feel the line is going to have a bit of heft and it's going to work. And then I can take that out and trust the line. It's nothing to do with me then, I'm just carrying it, that the line is the thing that will hold me in this space, which I wouldn't normally seek, being a very shy, retiring person. So it's standing up on my hind legs, unless, I don't think I would do it for anything other than poetry, actually. Take this space, which I consider a sacred space. I was very lucky in some ways that I hadn't been to many poetry readings before I started taking the poetry out into communities and to give it out to other people. So I had no preconceptions, but I had done an awful lot of street theatre and community theatre. So I was very aware of the main thing is to be heard, to transmit, that people can hear you is the main thing, and that you can take their attention. So I didn't have preconceptions, and I think I was lucky in that way. So I loved the space, but it would be only poetry that would get me to stand up and do it in public, That would be what I think.
You pass on this question. Okay, fair enough, Camilla. Thanks very much, Paula, and it is very easy to hear you and to hang on every word you have. So it's great that we got the opportunity to see you live tonight, and we're delighted to have had you join us as well, Ma. So could we get a final round of applause for our three readers tonight, three poets tonight: Séamus, Barra, Súilleabháin, Meehan, and Paula Meehan. So unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions from the audience, but we hope you'll stick around and get your questions asked regardless. And we'll be back at 9:30 for the next reading. Thanks very much.